What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to My Social Life. This is the podcast where you can hear the real stories behind the people on social media. I'm your host, Jacob Kelly. As always, today's podcast is powered by TrueFan. And before we get into today's podcast with Tony Greco, there's a couple things that we need to go over first. Number one, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please consider leaving a rating and a review. The more positive ratings and reviews you get, the more it helps the people find the show. And it really helps to grow the community that we're developing here. And if you're one of those people that have recently found the podcast, welcome. I'm very excited to have you here. Make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for future episodes. I put out brand new interviews every single Monday, and brand new takeaways episodes is an audio exclusive where I sit down and break down the most recent podcast episode every single Thursday. And last but not least, if you enjoyed today's podcast, be sure to share it to your Instagram story. Tag myself at the Jacob Kelly, tag Tony at Tony Greco TG, and I'll feature you on my account and send you a message as well. Now, without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Tony Greco. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to My Social Life. This is the podcast where you can hear the real stories behind the people on social media. I am your host, Jacob Kelly. As always, today's podcast is powered by TrueFan. And today on the podcast, we are joined by celebrity fitness trainer and entrepreneur, Tony Greco. Tony founded Greco Fitness back in the late 1990s, and it has gone on to become one of the most popular studios in Ottawa with plans of national and international expansion. Tony also trains the likes of NHL stars Claude, Giroux, and Mike Fisher, and celebrities like Carrie and Carrie Underwood. And I'm very excited to have him here on the podcast today. Tony, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I hear great things about this amazing podcast, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Where I want to start today, I want to go all the way back to the beginning. From my understanding, you were born in Italy and came over to Canada in the mid 70s, right?
Yeah, I was actually here, came in 1974. Poor family. I mean, my mom and dad were farmers back in like Southern Italy. And then we came to Ottawa because my mother's brother was here. And at the time, I guess Ottawa was starting to develop. So, it's your typical kind of like rags to riches, I guess, a story where, we had $500 in a suitcase. My dad got a job in construction, which was the easiest thing to do. My mom worked at the restaurant and then, got us through school and just started to kind of, set the journey from there.
Mm-hmm. And how does that impact you growing up, being an immigrant, coming to Canada with only, like you said, $500 and a suitcase? From my understanding, you didn't even speak the language when you first arrived either. So how does all of that impact you growing up?
Well, I mean, I think it either makes you or breaks you, and I think everything's about attitude. I mean, I still don't know how to speak the language. I'm just joking. But you know what? It really puts you up against the wall. And I truly mean that, because I remember my first day in school, like I didn't understand English and I didn't speak English. So I'm like, how the heck do you communicate? So you just learn either to get through it or to basically give up. And I think that attitude carries out in a lot of entrepreneurs, because as you know, through business, as people expand their horizons, they go through obstacles that hinder their positive growth. And it's easy to basically deflect and give up. But if you just go through it and carry on your discipline, then, and believe in what it is that you're trying to do and accomplish, then there's no stopping you, because there really is no stopping until you quit.
Mm-hmm. And your first passion, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was football, right? You were a running back at Glebe Collegiate?
Yeah, so I remember coming from Italy, and I met a good friend of mine who was actually my best man at the wedding. And he said, look, we're going to go and play football. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And then I remember the first practice, like, yeah, you just got to take the ball and run. So, I was 7 years old, and I started running with the ball, had some pretty good speed, and actually learned to work and love the game. And then I played it all through pretty much Pee-wee and Mosquito back then was the division. Used to play for a team called Rochester Lions. Then I went to Pee-wee. Then after that, I loved it so much that I even went to like Sooners camp. And then I wanted to get to Carleton and Ottawa U and want to go to their camps. But I went through high school like Glebe Collegiate, played my first year as a cornerback, which was the outside position because everybody was pretty big. I wasn't a big guy. And then the second year, I switched cornerback and running back, and I continued to actually play through high school and had great years. And I had the West East Senior Bowl, and that was the big one. was like all the all-stars would kind of play. Remember Lansdowne Park, and just such a great experience. And I think that's what started most of the stuff off for me. And then I actually transitioned into martial arts, and then evolved from there. So I think the journey, if I have to credit a lot, is obviously the martial arts for the discipline, and then the football for the drive as well.
Yeah, and I actually want to talk about martial arts and that discipline because, from my understanding, you took it pretty seriously. And I have some things written down. You said it helped you create balance, discipline, and strengthen your mind. And I'm curious if you could explain how martial arts did that for you.
Well, I mean, I originally took martial arts to actually beat up people, and because you hold this anger of just trying to just get your whole frustrations out. So I remember I used to watch Lee movies, and then I used to go and make the nunchucks in my dad's garage, and then I'd actually carry them until they became illegal to try to beat up people. And I think part of that was that it was about the survival of being in a new city, not speaking the language, not sure. I mean, back then there was a lot of bullying, what we call bullying now, but back then it didn't exist. So you almost have to kind of always be aware of who people are and what they're doing. So again, it was a great way to defend yourself. So I just took it, like I said, to beat up people, but that's why I needed it, because it actually gives you a lot of discipline not to beat up people. So I truly believe that everybody should go through some kind of discipline, and martial arts was great. And now I know that the way that the teaching philosophies now have changed, because you can't be as strict to someone for several reasons. But I remember going through katas, which are forms of patterns, and I'm like, what does this got to do with martial arts? But when you put it into perspective, when you're turning a direction and you're going forward, like for instance, working different fundamentals like blocking, striking, and punching, it's amazing how your brain has to think. So strengthening the mind on sparking these new, brain cells in your brain to be more aware, more alert. Uh, Martial arts teaches you that. So when you carry it out in your everyday world, you can walk into a room and you're almost aware of like, okay, I know there's like, a black counter there, and there's like a TV on the wall, and there's so and so. So it's amazing how it gives you that vision. The strength, because you're persevering through belts. They use belt rankings to give you a reward, because everybody wants to be rewarded for their hard work. So when you put in the time, you advance in different belt levels. And I remember I stopped asking when my next belt was, because I came down to the conclusion that it's hard work, hard work, hard work, hard work, and then eventually it'll pay off. So I remember that, what I did to go through my black belt was pretty remarkable. And I think everybody that's listening right now that has gone through some of the martial arts rankings knows that there's a huge level of discipline. And it's tough to teach that. People are like, what do you mean? Like, how do you do that? Like, you have to go through it to accept it and really see it. Because, even on this podcast, like we could be telling people about it. People are like, oh, it sounds cool. It sounds awesome. But until you really truly feel what you go through and how you go through these obstacles, for instance, I remember my white to yellow belt testing, which is the first belt ranking. Well, all I did is sit in like a kibadachi stance, which is a horse stance, because kiba means horse in Japanese, and you're sitting like where your knees are 9 degrees. It's like a low squat. And I remember sitting there for like 2 minutes, and my two senseis, my instructors, left, and I'm like, okay, what are we going to do for our belt? And the whole time was to be able to sit in that stance, believing that your mind can accomplish this. And that's the kind of language. So martial arts is like a language. It teaches you how to really persevere and go through obstacles that really hinder your positive growth.
Mhm. And so you said to get all the way to that black belt, it was a lot of just consistent hard work. And eventually through martial arts, you got into kickboxing. From my understanding, it was 2.5 years straight of training every single day towards becoming a kickboxer. And eventually you went on to win a gold medal. But leading up to that gold medal, there's a lot of trials and tribulations. I know your first fight was about 30 seconds long, and then you're doing fights about every single month. Can you kind of talk to me about that time before that tournament to go for the gold medal, where you're just literally fighting every single month just to keep going, and sometimes you're winning, sometimes losing? How do you keep pushing in that time?
Oh man, it's great. You did a lot of research on this, Jacob. I admire you, man. Yeah, you're taking me way back here. Well, I remember I went exactly my first fight of competing. I lasted 30 seconds, and I remember I got a bleeding nose. I was a white belt. I'm like, what the heck? Because I mean, you either have the competitive edge in you or you don't, and it doesn't matter whether you have it or not, because people obviously get into different things for different reasons. I got into martial arts. Yes, I wanted to, achieve a goal, but then I also wanted to fight because that's what I originally got in there for. And I remember the first fight was 30 seconds, and then I was even debating whether or not to give up, and I kept going. Then I remember competing at a local circuit, and I never really won a lot of tournaments until I started fighting kind of like the adult division. And I remember I used to have a lot of friends of mine that used to compete, used to do really well. I was lucky enough, I got a sponsor to sponsor me and do a tournament every month in North America. So NASCA, which is National Association of Sports Karate Association, it was like one of the biggest tournaments. And every year, so every month you had a tournament. You had to go and attend and you get ratings. So I started to win at those tournaments. I traveled to Minnesota, I traveled to Atlanta, Florida. They were all pretty much across North America. Was seeded fourth, and that progress of winnings gave me enough confidence that then what happened was I started to train harder and harder and harder for the World Championships. But I had to believe that in me, and again, it took me losing and persevering to get to that next level of acknowledging that you have and you can have what it takes if you work hard at it. So I trained 2.5 years, two and a half hours every single day, except for Saturday, Sunday. And, I can honestly say that those training sessions were very brutal, puked a few times, and just over exerted what I think I could potentially do. But that was the feeling I had to get to feel that I had what it takes to get through.
And in that tournament where you won the gold medal, the IAKSA World Kickboxing Championship in 1995, how many fighters do you have to go through? Like, how many fights do you have? What's that tournament like?
Yeah, so you have to keep winning. So what it was it was a 2-day event. Is about 17 to 21 fighters in that division. So your first day you would have 3 fights. If you lose the first fight, you're completely out of the tournament. So it's kind of like tennis. You got to keep winning. And then what happens is usually it took 5 fights to get to the gold medal in that division. So you have to beat out 5 opponents, but to get there, there's about 21 opponents in the division. And that's why it's such a tough thing to do, because again, you can't lose. And it's the obstacles and the experience and the challenges that come towards you on a regular basis that teach you to make those decisions that, again, you only lose when you quit. Because I thought about actually quitting. I remember I took a shot in the jaw in one of the tournaments, and it was like, just quit. Like, there's no money in it. But I got back up and started to basically do it because I love the sport and I just wanted to accomplish something. And I mean, it was great for me because it gave me the attitude that, like, you can conquer whatever you put your mind to it. So now it's like you become fearless of a lot of the obstacles that come across your way. And that's why it's good, because most people, if they've experienced a thought and they've gone through it, then if that experience and emotion comes back again, they just know how to deflect it and go through it anyways.
Mhm. And so in that gold medal fight, I believe it was the 18th minute of that fight, you took a kick to the face, and that was a scary moment in that fight. You talk about how you have to keep persevering, you have to keep getting up. The old Mike Tyson quote is, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. What about kicked in the face? What happens to you in that moment where you take that shot? There's about 5 minutes to go in the fight. It's the gold medal. What's going through your mind at that point? After that round, when you go back to the corner, like, what's going through your mind?
Oh, well, it's amazing you asked that question, because I was actually going through that visual in my mind about 3 weeks ago. And it's crazy how your mind remembers certain things that you experience, and that emotion it creates at that specific moment that you use in other examples. So I'll tell you exactly, because it was fresh in my mind. I remember I got kicked right in the face, and my coach at the corner, I went to the corner and I said, I'm not losing this fight. Like, I've trained way too hard. Like, I truly believe that I put in way, way more work. And I knew it. Like, I just felt it. You felt that emotion. And I bet if I asked that opponent to this day, he would agree to it, because he was from Austria. And, I said, I'm not going to lose this fight. So it was almost like a wake up call. It was like the adrenaline that went with my thought pattern was like, it was just like unbelievable on how crazy like that feeling was that I was grasping. It's like, boom, it was like this whole burst of energy was like, okay, I'm going to win this fight. And sure enough, it was like, and then the fight ended up, I remember I was behind 2 points and I started to get more and more points. And then that was it. It was over.
And so how do you feel then when your hand gets raised at the end of that fight?
Well, it just feels that, it, you know, like all that, everything, like the guts, the blood, the sweat, you can't, you'll never do it. All that stuff just washes away. It's almost like a self-fulfillment, feeling that you just feel it's like an input in your brain that it's like everything you put your mind to that you want to accomplish and work severely hard to that point where you're almost like, call it knocked out, and get back up will work. And that's why, all these great leaders and fighters, I know there's so many different examples, use the Mike Tyson one. And it's so true because it is. I mean, I could have had a totally different mind shift after getting kicked, seeing the blood going, oh geez, I'm going to lose this fight. I'm going to lose this fight. But I didn't. I said, this is bullshit. Like, this guy's not going to win this fight. I worked way, way harder. I know I did. And here comes, I'm going to win this fight. And it just like, boom, the adrenaline the pain was gone. I didn't even see the blood anymore. I just saw, my hand being raised up and me being wrapped in a Canada flag. And that was like one of the greatest things and moments of my life.
Mhm. And then do you essentially retire from competing with boxing at that point, or do you keep going after that?
So what I did after is, from there, I was trying to get a movie deal. I remember at that time, the cool movies that were out were Mortal Kombat at the time. And some of my friends that were involved in martial arts out of Los Angeles were in that movie. They got a little bit of money. Not that that was the reason why, but I had to make a choice and say, okay, I'm at the top of my game here. I opened up a location and started to teach the discipline. I broke away from a franchise because I had my own philosophies from there. So I really did, in my mind, what I think most people would do, and that's share the discipline and the progress with others. And that's kind of what I started to do. I started to shift towards fitness because I knew that fitness was not just for the elite, it was for everybody. And I love that feeling of feeling good when you're active like that. And I think everybody should go through it and feel it. So I decided to just kind of like, retire from that and just teach the discipline to other people.
Mhm. I want to talk about those first studios because you had a kickboxing one and a martial arts studio, correct?
Yeah.
And from my understanding, your parents wanted you to be a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. So how was the conversation with mom and dad? Were you like, I'm not going to go to med school. I'm actually going to open up my own studio.
Yeah. Well, because that was the mentality of my parents. Are like, if you're not a doctor or a lawyer, you're going to be a loser, because that was the hard way of winning or trying to win. Because like I said, my dad, was just a construction worker, and my mom, I mean, she's got the most plain job in a restaurant. I think anybody could find a job doing that these days. And I guess they didn't want us to be that. And they didn't understand that, you get involved into stuff that you do because you love it. And I just want to, throw that out to people, is that love what you do and it doesn't become work. I truly loved it. I just made a career and out of it. And, financially it worked out for me, but I don't regret, doing anything else because I love what I do and I still do it to this day. So that's kind of where I think my parents now have see that I'm happy and what I have accomplished, but I still don't think they know what I really do. I got to be honest with you. So again, I think they just look at that we're safe. We brought up a good family. I'm blessed with a great family, a great wife, and great people around me, and that's what they feel. And I think in the end, because they're very simple people, and I know that now. I didn't know that as a kid, but they're very simple people. They still live in the same house that we bought 40 something years ago. I mean, even if they won a lottery, I could honestly say like their life will change, because their whole philosophy is bringing the family together, seeing everybody happy, everybody getting fed, and and that's it. And I can truly honestly say that. Like, I honestly think nothing would change. And I think because they've instilled that and they see that now out of their kids, that's what really makes them happy. And they feel that they've accomplished their mission. And at the end of the day, even us as parents, we always say we get to a level where it's like, okay, like why are we doing this? And obviously want to get our kids to follow our footsteps and carry on legacy, and just that's really what it is. And I think that's that cycle of life, where before everybody thinks that, you gotta be born, you gotta go to school, become a doctor, a lawyer, get married, and just follow a whole criteria that's supposed to go along with that wheel of life. But that's not the case now. And that's why it's hopefully people, can adjust and make their own life of what they truly have and what they truly like to do.
Mhm. And you mentioned how it's important to do what you love. And what a lot of people don't realize sometimes is that what you love will change. For you, it's been similar. It's been along the same lines, but first it was football, if we go all the way back, and then it was martial arts, and that eventually progressed into fitness. And the first original genesis of you really getting into fitness is wanting to become an Olympic trainer, right?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. I basically, like I said, I wanted to get, I couldn't go back to university to get my, degree in human connect. So what I did is I did a lot of research, and I said, okay, well, I want to get certified in all these different certifications because I want to train Olympic athletes. So I did a bit of research and got a hold of this guy, Ed McNeely, who used to teach at Ottawa U, owns a Sports Performance Institute, and his partner, Lloyd Armstrong. And Ed McNeely used to do, I don't know if you remember Muscle and Fitness magazines, those charts where they had the anatomy charts and all the areas were kind of like, colored. So like they would show you exercise and be like, okay, your pecs are working. So that's what he used to do. Really good guy. So I hired him for about almost a year. And I said, look, I was running my martial arts school. I'm like, I don't have time to go back to school, run a successful business. So I hired him for 8 months. He taught me every day for like 6 hours. We do a lot of the theory part, notebooks and questions and answers, and then we did a lot of the practical stuff. Where even when I did my nutrition certification, we actually went to Loblaws, and he was showing me how to read labels, and it was just such a cool experience. So it was great because I felt I had enough confidence to express that knowledge and teach that passion to other people, to the point where I said, okay, you know what? Part of this is I want you to take me as your client and show me how you would, take me through these phases. And sure enough, at the time we were doing a lot of periodization training where you'd say, okay, look, this is the way you pre-screen a client. This is what you do, at the beginning. Then you get into a more specific phase where we measure strength, increase the power. Then we get into pre-competitive. So it was all like a lot of periodization stuff. The fella, an MD, Tudor Bomba's got a great book out on periodization training. They follow a lot of that. And I liked it. It was still good. And to this day, people still follow that philosophy. Ed was a great professor, certified me. And what I admire about them is that you need to get and score at the highest of your level, or they won't give you a certificate. And what I mean by that is that, let's say, I remember the exam was like 18 pages. It was like taking a client and trying to fulfill his goal through the different phases, adding the speed levels of training techniques. It had to make sense. If it didn't, the way they market is they're like, well, look, you got this guy here that's trying to lose 10 pounds, but you got him in this phase. Review that phase, submit it again. So they get you to think and understand how these phases work to take a client from point A to Z. And that's what I liked about it. It was a fantastic course, Sports Performance Institute. And I think they went on and sold the business as well too. But right now I'm working a lot with a guy by the name of Kyle Dietz, who's out of the University of Minnesota, who's amazing. And Dr. Ben Peterson, who used to be the fitness director of the Philadelphia Flyers. I met him through Claude Giroux, one of my clients, who now is the fitness director out of for San Francisco 49ers. He actually runs the whole division from physiotherapists to chiropractors to trainers. They wrote a book on triphasic training, which is phenomenal. I think it's one of the best concepts that ever came out to teach fitness, to generate maximum force of power to anybody that wants to get stronger, faster, and really perform at a way better level. By far, one of the best.
Mhm. And then so you took this transition after your year of learning fitness and to become an Olympic trainer. Eventually, you end up instituting that into your studios. And you opened the first Greco, I believe, 1997, 1998. And so you make the switch from martial arts, kickboxing to these fitness circuits. And I have a bit of a two-pronged question based on that. One, fitness circuits weren't popular back then. This is a really innovative thing to do. You were ahead of your time doing so. So one, why did you do circuits? And two, when you did the circuits, from my understanding, you lost like 250 clients pretty much right away. So how come you keep going with the circuits and you don't revert back to martial arts and kickboxing because that was what was originally working?
Yeah. Okay. So I got out of the martial arts because um, I was very disappointed because I was coming up from a discipline that worked very hard, and hard work pays off. But what happened was martial arts became so commercialized that I wasn't, what's the word? I wasn't accepting it properly, meaning that, a lot of these kids, for instance, are just chasing a belt as opposed to a discipline. So because it's a business, you're stuck because you're like, do I give the person the belt? Do I, because there's a belt fee, right? And I just said, look, this is something that I don't want to do. I was very disappointed. I used to grade kids going to the next belt, and I used to go ask myself, what, that kid didn't really deserve it. Like, this is not right. I don't feel good doing this. So, so that's one of the major reasons why I got out of the martial arts. Not that the discipline isn't great. I think the discipline is great, and all martial arts are fantastic. But I just didn't like the way the grading system was. As far as the fitness goes, everybody wants to live a healthy life, and the feeling that you get from just going and being fit and doing something active was, I think, the experience that everybody should be feeling. And when I started with circuits, you're totally right. People thought I was crazy. They're like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. What's he doing? They're not even resting. Like, it was like, honestly, it was a shit show. I used to hear all the haters from everywhere, from like even some of the guys that had very successful business. But I knew that people needed accountability. People needed to be pushed. And I took a book that was like a class pass, and you couldn't get into the class unless you filled out your book, because 80% of your success is all about fuel you put in your body, which is your food. So everybody knows that. People know how to eat. How come there's so many obese people out there? Because they don't have the discipline, or they don't have the accountability, or they don't have guys like me to push them, or podcasts like this to listen to get the discipline. So what I did is I basically constructed a book, and they had to fill out what they were eating, when they were eating, what they were eating. And then randomly had people in class go, okay, today, give me your book. Oh, look, you didn't eat breakfast. That's a meal that you can't skip because you got to break the fast. Oh, wait a minute, you didn't even eat a snack. What the heck's going on? So what I did is I started to ingrain the message in their brain that they had to eat, but it's what you eat, because eating is not a bad thing to do. Because the misconception there, especially women, were like, oh, if I eat, I'm going to get fat. No, that's not true. If you eat right, you're going to lose, fat, and you're going to build more muscle, and you're going to be healthier. So the hardest part back then was that we had to educate everybody. Where now, I mean, there's so many resources out there. Like, people can find out exactly what you need to do when you need to do. So really, all we really do is motivate and educate. I mean, everybody knows what to do. I mean, and so back then it was harder, but it worked because we transformed bodies, we uplift spirits, and we strengthen minds. People are like, you do fitness? I'm like, I don't do fitness. Like, what do you mean? I don't do fitness. Because that's what we did. Because people would come in there, first 3 weeks, they want to lose 10 pounds. Then we would follow up on them and be like, hey, how do you feel? Like, oh my God, I got so much energy. I feel great. I'm running up the stairs with my kids. So now it wasn't about the weight loss anymore. It was about how they were feeling. And that's why our whole slogan was transforming bodies, uplift spirits, strengthening minds. Now the new slogan is building bodies, strengthening minds, because people understand that exercise now is a way of life. It's kind of like the new prescription to a better health, right? I mean, you look at people now, you're like, you're not working out. They're like, no. You almost look at them like, what the heck, right? Almost like same feeling you get like if you see people smoking a cigarette. It's like, what are you doing? It's almost like a weird thing now, right? So, yeah.
And then, so from that point, then when you lose those 250 clients, talk to me about how you've grown Greco into what it is today. What are some things that people don't see? How did you grow? I know initially, I think you went to 4 locations, and then franchising really started, and you expanded to about 15 locations across the city, 1 in Toronto. How did you get to that point?
Well, I think it was again using the mantra of like, my goal was the best thing I can be, and I was achieving this whole like trip or journey the best I can be. And what I did is that most of the people that bought these franchises were members because they loved the feeling. It was all about the community, the feeling. It was like kind of like friends. Everybody knows your name. People would sit at our espresso bar, like I'm sitting right here, talking to you, and it was cool. So and so would come in, a professional athlete, a celebrity, like, hey, how you doing? Like everybody was it was a happy, cool place. And it was that experience that sold the franchisees because most of them were members. And then at the same time, it was a really good payday because obviously, it is a business. But I think it was the community first and then the business second. So money was a result of that experience and that community-based build-up. And it was great. And then it got to a point like we sold 16 locations, one in Toronto. And at that point, my partner and I, we decided, like, look, if we're going to continue to do this, we need to go full throttle. So we had a lot of interest of all these different companies that wanted to buy our business. We thought they were just a bunch of tire kickers. Our lawyer called us and said, look, there's a company out of New York that deal with a lot of high-end boutiques that, they see you growing, especially when we started in Toronto. I think the first one in Toronto at 12 Blue Jay Way kind of set it off because we're in a city with 5 million people. No one knows what Greco is. We're next to the Rogers Center. It takes a lot of guts and to kind of be right there paying premium rent. But you know what? We believed in the brand. We believed in the franchisees. And sure enough, it was a great success because they were there for quite a bit of time. So what happened was going back to the company out of New York that is dealing with all these big brands, they sent the junior partner to Ottawa, first time in Ottawa. And he toured all the locations with me. We picked them up, first time in Ottawa, loved the atmosphere, loved the coolness of the place, the vibe, the music, the people, the coffees, you name it. It was a place to be. Beautiful day as well that day. I remember it was a sunny day. We took them around different locations. Then we never heard back. Went back to New York, caught the 5:30 flight back to New York. We never heard for 6 months. We're like, what the heck happened to that guy? So then our lawyer's like, apparently he was let go of the company, but the deal is still on the table. And finally, 6 months later, the CEO of the company came down, Pete Moore of Integrity Square, which was the firm that basically raised all the capital. And then he came down. He actually stayed an extra day in Ottawa. So same scenario. We took him for a tour in all locations. Everybody was all like, full of energy. Another great sunny day. Say when the sun shines, the energy's there, right? And sure enough, it was. And then what happened was he stayed an extra day and he did some due diligence. He actually sat around a coffee shop, asked people in Ottawa, hey, Tony Greco, how was he as a person? Guy, and I admire him for that. And then he left the next day. So sure enough, about 6 months later, now we're going on 2 and a bit years now, we finally get the wheels in motion. So I called it anticipation, anxiety, depression, because I didn't know what the heck was going on. And it's like, I felt like I was on a roller coaster ride, coming down, going up, coming down, going up. It was an insane experience selling a company. And but the deal got done, and here we are today now. And I'm actually, working on exiting out of the company right now as we speak, because I'm all about vision, belief, and again, I'm about my vision, and no one should take that away from you. What you've seen is you believe, and I know that the company's going to go in a different direction, most likely doing an online stuff. But I'm going to be building a new brand called TG Athletics. And I'm really excited about that because that's the next chapter in the life. And hopefully this will be the legacy too, by the way.
And I do want to talk about that next chapter. But before that, I have one other question. And it's a quote from you. I believe it's actually from Deepak's podcast. I can't quite remember where I got this, but it says, everyone looks at the glory of Greco, but I can tell you stories that'll make you cry and not want to go into business. So what are some of those things that you had to push through when growing Greco in the first place? Similar to how back with boxing, when you got kicked in the face, you had to get back up and keep going. What are some of those things in a business perspective that kicked you in the face, but you still got up and kept going?
Yeah, well, you know what? That's actually, you couldn't pick a better time because I mean, with COVID, I know that a lot of the small businesses are hurting, and it's been a complete nightmare. And I mean, we will get out of this strong, but I think people that survive during COVID will definitely succeed. And I remember in Barhaven, because there was so many martial arts studios, like they were at every corner, and it was like you name it. And I always said, look, competition is great. I love competition because it exposes more people to what you're doing. And if you have a great value and a great product and you deliver it, people will come to you. So I remember that we went through a time where we were 3 months behind in our rent. My business partner had to sell his Harley Davidson, a motorcycle, because that was a time where we had to throw in the towel. It was either we throw in the towel or we make it one more go out of it. And you know what? Even to this day, if we never did that, we'd never be here today. I sold my car. We were, like I said, we were behind in the rent. We had put a down payment on our home. We had to extend that. It was a nightmare. It was so crazy. We owed people money, and we just didn't have the money, and we slowly paid like distributors. And I mean, everything you could possibly think of that was thrown at us was thrown at us. We were sued for different liabilities. You name it. It was crazy. And it's like, you know what? But again, that's why I can't stress enough to share with people is that, you know, if you believe and, you know, nothing's going to stop you, you get back up, it's going to happen, you know. And just like coming out of this whole, you know, COVID, I mean, I know it's been pretty bad, but we're going to come out of this because, you know, with night, there's day, right? And I mean, I know that everybody says there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There is, and you got to believe it and keep going through and you'll see it. And I think we're going to see it sooner than later. So, yeah, so many of those stories, and yeah, it'll make you cry. I mean, like you can't even imagine. I can keep going on and on and on, but there's a few of them. Big one was we had to sell the car. He had to sell the Harley, and that was his. I mean, that was his like pride and joy. Like this guy was like, you know, I mean, he loved Harley Davidson. And the other story was this: is that in the early 1998, 2000, you know, a lot of people that work on marketing. I remember at the time, after in 1995 when I won my gold medal, I went to Florida and I was asked to do some stuff with Tony Little. Remember the guy with the ponytail and doing all these infomercials? He was one of the kings of infomercials. So I was in St. Petersburg, Florida, and he was going to use me as kind of like his guy from Canada, you know, doing this stuff on machines and selling this product. And I remember I came back here and I did this videotape called Karate Size, the Tony Greco way. I met a marketer and he's like, you know what, this is not going to work. You're not going to make money. I said, well, I don't care. I just want to get the product out there. I got into Blockbusters. We sold 2,200 cassette tapes. Plus it resulted into opening up the first Greco Lean and Fit, which was right next to Barhaven, our martial arts studio. If I didn't take that opportunity, I would never be here today because that idea would have never taken off. So ideas are really good, but you got to follow through with it. And that was a perfect one. So if you have a good idea, you got to get through because the best ideas are kept in the graveyard, you know, and you have to follow through with your idea if you really believe in it.
Why didn't you throw in the towel when you were 3 months behind rent? You guys are selling cars, Harleys. Why don't you throw in the towel at that point?
Well, one thing is that's all I knew. I mean, and that's all I believed in it. And I was like, what am I going to go back to? Like, this is what I know. This is what I know best. This is what I could deliver the best. And it's not the people. It's the fact that, you know what, there's a transition here where there was a lot of martial arts studios. It was competitive, but look, you know, you stuck with it and sticking to something again that you truly love and have the passion for. Everybody's going to come back to it because you know what? Even some of my old members, they left and they went elsewhere, but guess what? They were all back because, you know, you have something good and you could deliver it. People feel that vibration. They feel the energy. And that's what people want to be around. It's like a recycled energy. So if you go to some place that even might look better than yours, but the energy is not there, you don't want to be part of it. So it's all the energy that you bring out. Everybody wants to be around positive, high, energetic people. I mean, you know, everybody has bad days, but you can't take that to your business. That's not what people want to see. You know, you got to be able to switch it. And that's managing your states. And that's my 3 things is visualize, believe in what you're seeing in your mind, and then managing your state, that if it is a good day or a bad day, to you, it's always got to be a good day, because you're the leader of the pack. And if you're not that leader, the view will never change. And you're paying the view because people are at your establishment, and that's what they want to see. They don't want to hear that you've had a bad day. That's why they're there. They want to have a better day.
And so you had the vision for Greco even back then, and today you said you're a big vision guy. So talking about your vision for TG Athletics, what's that look like? What are you building towards right now?
Well, TG Athletics is really truly bringing out the athlete out of everybody, because I think everybody's got the athlete in them, because the way we function, whether you're a pro athlete has to go there and perform. Well, a parent has to go out there and perform as well. They have kids to deal with. They have stress to deal with. They have bills to pay. They have all sorts of stuff. And there's movement patterns that are created every day. You get out of your car, you go home, you sit behind a desk. I mean, you go up, you move down, you sit, and it's the function of movement patterns. And what happens is, and I know this, that throughout my whole career, we didn't trees in the woods, and what I mean by that is that if you take that movement pattern and you make it better, so you absorb more force, and you could withstand force. So if you do that, then you could generate a lot more power. So what do I mean by that is that a lot of people that do a lot of circuits and stuff, and this is not to take a jab at trainers or clients or anything like that, but there's just no measurement. And I was one of those guys, so I'm just as guilty, meaning that, we hope the best for the client, but really we're just throwing exercises together. But if we take the time and really work a concept that could distribute and give best, ultimate force of power and generate that so the client feels stronger and faster, you don't have to be an NHL athlete or a professional soccer player or basketball player. You just have to be someone that wants to function better, get stronger, faster, and be really quick at what is that you do. And most important is eliminate injuries. So what I did is I started to follow Claude, who again, and Ben Peterson, who made a lot of sense of this, because I was working with a guy like Claude Giroux, who's a top player in the NHL, and he was sharing a lot of the philosophies behind the training, the measurements and the tests that they've done. And they spend like tens of thousands of dollars testing people on force plates and all different ways to see how come these athletes were not getting injured as fast, were producing more force of power, we're getting quicker, we're getting faster. I'm like, this is amazing. It makes total sense. So when you train 3 different tempos in a block, you're really doing the best for your body, because you have the first phase where you do the eccentric movement, where you're really like taking the time to do the technique slow. And when you're doing it slow, what you're doing, it sounds gross, but you're ripping the myosin head of that muscle. You're rebuilding muscle tissue. It's like you're making that tissue more thicker, more resistance to force. And then when you do that for 2 weeks, everything from your brain, your organisms in your body go, wow, I'm holding on to this force. So in the second week is where you do the isometric, but because those tissues and those cables are so much stronger and thicker, they can resist more. So because they could resist more, when you go back to the concentric phase, then you can push more. But see, people never experience that. I was one of those guys. I never took the time to go slow. I played football. High school, I would go in there, do a few bicep curls, a few shoulder presses, some squats. And I felt the pump. And it's like, I guess this is cool. This is the look. But I never, like, what was I measuring? Blood flow in my muscles and getting a pump? Because that's really what was happening. So now with this concept, you could apply to any fitness regime. It doesn't have to be mine. It's like, boom. Now, I know what people are thinking right now. They're like, yeah, that are listening. They're probably going, yeah, I do that eccentric movement. Yeah, you only do one movement though. Like, you have to spend the time, because your brain has to adapt to this. And when it adapts to it, your stress, receptors even adjust, because it is a stressful movement. If I tell you to hold 80% of your 1 rep max in a squat, and I say, Jacob, go down slow, your brain's going going, oh my gosh, oh my God. And you got to tell it, I got it. So it's that whole adaptation of what's happening during the course of that movement pattern that is so key.
And so then with TG Athletics, is that going to be, are you going to be opening up new studios? Are you going online? Is it just going to be one-on-one? Like, what's that going to look like?
Well, it's going to take a lot of the the concept and put them in the circuits style, because group training is really comfortable and people like that. And I think it's fantastic. And with our team here, we can uplift that and step it up a notch and throw in a lot of that concept. And that's what's going to be really cool about it, is that it's going to be a different concept in a group atmosphere with group classes, but you're going to get so much more out of it, because now you're spending that simple time for that specific block training that people are going to see the difference in strength and speed and power. And that's what's really cool about it. Like I have 50 plus clients that are able to stop on a dime. And a lot of these clients have had trainers before, and it's like, well, why? Why can you do that now? Well, that's because you spent, a good 2 weeks really building a foundation where you now could resist that force. Now, because you're more comfortable and you could stop on a dime, well, then you could push off on a dime. But if you go to stop on a dime and you lose your balance, chances are you're not going to be able to push off that dime, because you're just not trying to stabilize. So I need to see, and I on social media, just to show people that, hey, look at this person here. I mean, you're talking like incredible amount of strength and energy to be able to fulfill that movement pattern. And everything is about how we're moving. So when you target these kind of training methods and concepts to people that are moving on a regular basis, especially that have desk jobs, I mean, coming in 2-3 times a week, they're going to see a huge amount of difference in their whole life as far as fitness goes, not just physically, but mentally, because they're going to be able to move so much quicker and have better balance and have more strength and have more energy. And that's really what it's all about. It's not about, and that's bringing the athlete out of them as well. So personal training, group training, athletic training, and a lot of group training would be definitely the model, but at a whole new different level, more on an athletic perspective. And that's why we went with TG Athletics, because you really are truly training and bringing out the athlete out of you.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned social media there briefly. Talk to me for a second about your TikTok. I know it's really starting to gain some traction. I think you've been doing it for the last month. I saw the stats posted the other day for your first month. I think you're probably close to 1 million views or something like that, month one. Like, talk to me how that's going.
Yeah, I mean, well, thanks to Deepak and Jamie. Like, I didn't even know anything about TikTok, but they saw that I had great tips for kids. And I'm so blessed on, like, some of these kids, like every day they're sending me messages that I can't even keep up. And that's why I had to get a team, because I figure everybody that engages really truly either has a lot of time on their hands or really wants to know the answer. And I know these kids definitely probably have a little bit of both, because some of them are 14, 15, 16, but I know they're truly engaged in their sports, because the comments that they're adding are really truly comments that most kids would ask that age. How do I get faster? How do I get quicker? How do I get stronger? So I just threw out a lot of these basic tips, and it's been catching on, because I think a lot of them have been implementing them in their training, and they just feel better. And then Jamie and Deepak steering the whole thing now. We've created a Zoom call link. So December 20th, I'm going to be trying to answer every single one of their questions and really trying to uplift them to take their game to the next level. So it's been a lot of fun, because it's what I do. I work a lot with a lot of hockey players. It comes natural to me. I love the sport now. I just went from hockey to football. I love playing it myself. And I feel that hockey players, out of most of the athletes, have a really good discipline as well. So it's a lot of fun to work with them and really seeing them excel to the next level. Like my client, Jack Quinn, being drafted first round, 8th overall pick now with Team Canada. That's very rewarding to guys like me, because here's a guy that was projected to go 3rd round, took 2 years to train properly, building the body, strengthening the mind. And then, his craft says it all on the ice. So he's just one of them. We also have Brant Clark, who's supposed to go top pick in the NHL next year's draft. So it's rewarding to be around this culture of this great team of people. And it's really neat to share that with other young people that are chasing the dream. So yeah, the TikTok's been a lot of fun. And I mean, it's great, because I see these kids, it really does mean a lot to them. And it's rewarding for me to give back to them.
And with TikTok, I mean, traditionally it's skewed younger for a long time. You get a lot of younger kids on there, but you're training these elite level athletes with the Jack Quinn, Graham Clark, Claude Giroux. And so how does it differ then in terms of training for an elite level athlete versus a younger kid that's 11, 12 years old? Because you find nowadays kids are getting pushed so hard at such a young age because all their parents want them to be that next guy in the NHL. So how does training differ for guys of different abilities and skill sets?
Yeah, so that I mean, most kids now is competitive. Like I have 13 and 14-year-olds. I have a 14-year-old who, is projected to be top pick in the OHL next year. This guy Henry Muse, doing really well. So what happens is if you start the foundation at that age properly, and what I mean by that is I just give you an example. Like I see a lot of these kids, they go and train in groups, and that's okay. But what happens is that you have a lot of these kids that, for instance, want to get faster. And all of a sudden, these trainers, and they go into a group style and they're training for over, 30 seconds or a minute. Well, you've just trained that client to be slower because, your top speed on the ice is like a fraction of a second to 1 second. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that they're only training 10 seconds, and then getting the full recovery. This is stuff that knowledge to these kids is so much power because these kids obviously want to work out, but it's what they're doing in the workout, and like I never let my kids, when I'm measuring speed, I never let them go more than 10 seconds. As soon as I see them start slowing down, I stop. Even if they feel that they're going as fast, I blow the whistle at 10 seconds because I want them to have maximum output for that 10 seconds. When I'm trying to create a lot of power, I got my kids jumping because your vertical jump distinguishes your leg power. So the game is a single leg sport. How fast can you transition that leg power into speed and velocity? So what I do is I train those adaptations. Um, the kids are ingraining with their big toe. Why? Because if you're ingraining with your big toe, now you have proper, firing patterns because now your glutes, your hamstrings, and your QL is activated properly. So little things like that is positioning, mobility, and then introducing the weights to kids. But again, 80% of their one rep max. Because you're like, oh, well, isn't weights bad for kids? Well, no, I know kids that run up the stairs with their baby sister that are 12 and their baby sister is like 30 pounds and they're only 2 years old. That's a weight bearing exercise. They're running up the stairs with their sister. So it's the way you actually move and the proper weights that you're doing. Now, I wouldn't have, my 13-year-old student do 500 pounds on a squat, obviously, but if we measure that one rep max and we help them out, that's why you're supposed to build the strength. People are like, well, you're helping them lift it. Yes, exactly, because it is heavy, and we're supposed to help them lift it. That's why we're doing a big, heavy max load because that's what the body's required. Is you're pushing that body be more than it's normally supposed to be pushed. But don't forget, you're playing at an elite level here. You're not just a regular person here. You're an athlete, soon to be, a pro and a semi-pro. I mean, a semi-pro then a pro. So you have to take it a little bit different. And it's all the way the knowledge and the training is delivered to these kids, which I think is so important.
I know one of your mottos is know who you are and what you want. So I'm curious, what does Tony Greco want today?
Well, Tony Greco wants to share the fitness and the lifestyle that someday people can look back and say, you know what, that was the difference in my life. I thought I was going to do this, but I went into fitness. It wasn't only physically better for me, it was mentally. And if I could do that and change, several people's lives, then the legacy will go on because I'm a true believer that fitness is the new medicine for people. Um, and yeah, so that's what Tony would want to go on is know who you are and what you want. But I could tell you, it starts by taking your first step into the world of health and fitness.
I love that. I know we're running out of time here. I'm just going to jump to the last question that I ask every single one of my guests. And so this question, I kind of like to flip the script a little bit. So it's not me asking the question, it's you asking the question, but it's not to me. So pretend you have a crystal ball. You can ask this crystal ball any question and you will get the 100% honest answer. What is one question you'd want to know the answer to?
Hmm, good one. Well, the one question I would think that I really want to know the answer is, what would be your expiration date? And and the reason for that is because I've accepted and acknowledged that there is an expiration date. And one thing I can't do is buy time. But if I knew the answer to the question, then I could really schedule and be realistic about what it is that I'm trying to accomplish. And that would probably be the answer to my question. What is my expiration date?
I love it. But I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today. There's so much more we could have talked about. We'll have to have you on for a second one to talk about mindset and everything else you got going
Yes,
on.
love to be back on for sure.
I appreciate that. But I want to give you the floor. Where can the people find you, plug anything and everything you got right now?
Yeah, so they can go to tgathletics.com for the website. And they could also go to TG Athletics on Instagram. And they could go to TG Athletics on TikTok. So that's pretty simple. Yeah, tgathletics.com.
Awesome. Make sure everything's linked in the show notes down below so that they can find you. I want to thank you once again for taking time to be on the podcast. I want to thank everybody for listening. Whether you've listened the entire way through or you only listen to bits and pieces, I really appreciate you taking time to check this out. Everyone do me a big favor. Go and follow Tony. Go and follow TG Athletics. Like I said, everything will be linked in the show notes down below. If you'd like to follow me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at @TheJacobKelly. Feel free to come and say hello. My DMs are always open. If you'd like to follow the podcast, you can find us on Instagram at My Social Life Podcast or YouTube by searching on My Social Life. As always, today's podcast is powered by True Fan. Thank you once again for listening, everybody. We'll talk soon.